Greetings and welcome to the 17th installment of the Rocket IT Business Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Hyatt, and today I'm joined by a man whose life has resulted in one of the Southeast's largest residential programs for children in crisis situations. At the ripe age of 27, with no land and little money to his name, Eddie Staub was driven by a courageous vision to positively impact communities through the reunification of local families. 35 years and 315 acres later, that vision has since transpired into Eagle Ranch, a nonprofit facility that CNN rightfully nicknamed the Miracle on Chestnut Mountain. So now, to share a glimpse into how Eagle Ranch has continued to impact multiple generations of children and their families, I'd like to welcome Eddie to the show. Eddie, thanks for joining us.
Great. It's great to be with you, Matt.
I told you before the show that I have been looking forward to this interview for quite some time. As you know, we had originally planned to record way back in the early spring before our pandemic kind of took over all our lives. And so we've been delayed for a long time. And now through the miracle of technology, we're doing it over the web. But I'm so glad to spend some time with you this morning.
I really have looked forward to it. So it's great to be with you.
So, Eddie, I'm just going to start by asking you a little bit about the why behind Eagle Ranch. I know a little bit of your story. Our listeners may not. They may not be familiar with Eagle Ranch. And so I'd love if you could just tell us a little bit about the premise and mission of Eagle Ranch. How did you get started, and where did that idea come from?
Right. Yeah, and that's a great place to start, Matt, because everything emanates from our why, whether it's individually, organizationally. So our why with Eagle Ranch is basically twofold. First, that Eagle Ranch would be a tangible expression of God's goodness and power in this world. That when people look at Eagle Ranch, they look past a person or a group of people and to a God who is still at work in this world and making a difference in this world. Interestingly, we had a group out to Eagle Ranch. This was a little while back, and I noticed a guy in the back of the room that I had known since arriving in Georgia back in the early 80s, and this was in the probably 2010. And he had never been out to the ranch. He had been a good friend of mine. And I saw him in the back of the room and as I was speaking, I made a mental note. I need to see him after this because I haven't seen him in a while. And sure enough, the meeting ended and he just bolted out of the room. And I was going, oh gosh, I missed him. And after the meeting, someone called me in my office and they said, "Did you see so and so at the meeting?" I said, "Yeah." And I said, "I tried to get to him after my talk and he just left real quickly." And he said, "Well, Eddie, what he did is he drove around the ranch because he had never been down there before. And he called me when he got back to the office and he said, 'I've never been out to Eagle Ranch.' And he said, 'I can tell you this, there is no way that place would happen apart from God.'"
Awesome.
And I don't know where this guy is in his spiritual journey, but he could see firsthand that God was at work, and as a result, Eagle Ranch. So that's my heart's desire, is that when people look here, they see God doing great things. The second thing is of our why is that we would be the hands and feet of Jesus to hurting people. And Jesus was always moving toward people who were struggling, people that were on the margins, and even people that thought they had it all together and just said, "There's more for you. You may have a great portfolio, you may have great influence, but there is more," like Nicodemus, right? And he also went to those who are really struggling in life. And we had a young boy here. He'd lived here about 6 months, and he'd been the product of a really brutal kind of divorce. And he was walking around the ranch. I pulled up my car and I said, "How you doing, son?" He goes, "Not good, Eddie. I'm not doing good." And I said, "Well, get in my car." And we were driving around. He was telling me about his family situation. And I looked at him. I said, "Son," I said, "there's greatness in you." And he literally physically jumped in his seat in the car as if, could that possibly be true? And I think that's what Jesus was about, calling out greatness that was in people that perhaps didn't even think there was greatness in them. And that is one of our great messages to the children, that there is greatness in you. Regardless of what you've been told, regardless of how you feel, that is the truth. And the early parts of your story don't have to be predictive of the way the rest of your story is going to go. And that's our greatest challenge, Matt, is because children, the first 13, 14 pages of their story have been tragic. They've been difficult. And they go, I know how this is going to end. And we intersect that. We come in on page 14 or page 15 and say, that's not true. That doesn't have to be the way your story is going to go. And that verse from Jeremiah, "I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans to prosper you, not to harm you, to give a future and a hope," is true. And it's operative in their lives. And to get them to believe that is our greatest challenge. So that's our why, to be a tangible expression of God's goodness and power, and to be the hands and feet of Jesus for hurting people.
Well, I love it. And I think from what I know of you and the ranch, you're living out that why on a regular basis. I want to come back to that in just a minute. But before I do, I think it's important for our listeners that don't have any idea what Eagle Ranch is to kind of give them maybe a mental picture of what the ranch is. I mentioned in our intro 315 acres. So you've got a property that is up northeast of Atlanta. What if people come to the gates of Eagle Ranch? What unfolds in front of them? What do they see?
Well, our physical plan is, as you mentioned, we have 315 acres. We have 10 children's homes, 4 for girls, 6 for boys. We have 7 boys per home, so 42 boys, and 6 girls per home, so 24 girls. So we can take care of almost 70 children here.
Wow.
And they come and live here for a season of their lives, Matt, that averages about 2 years. And our goal is family restoration and reunification. Now, when people think of children's homes historically, they have looked at it very child-centric, sort of Boys Town-esque, that you have these little orphans. And but the reality is,
I would add, before you go on, I personally would have sort of an institutional view when you say a home, but that's not what's at the Eagle Ranch.
No, it's very much like a neighborhood.
Yeah.
The homes are about 7,000 square feet. You're right, Matt. People come here and they go, I think these are going to be like Boy Scout huts, like
Right.
And they're like residential homes. And it looks very much like a neighborhood and that kind of thing. So we have a house parent couple that lives in each of those homes, and they model a Christian family to the children. And we have 5 master level counselors that do individual, group, and family counseling to help these children and their families work through their emotional pain. And with like I said, the end result being family restoration, reunification. When I started the ranch back in the early 80s, children tended to stay here a little longer. They'd stay 3-4 years.
Oh.
And it's just not the case anymore. And an out-of-home placement like Eagle Ranch, a child, literally the average stay is 18 months to 2 years, and our stay about 2 years. We have several children that are going to be graduating this coming May. They will have been here over 3 years. But the reality is, is when a child leaves here, Matt, they are going to go somewhere. And 95% of the time, that somewhere is back home.
Hmm.
And if we
Wow.
haven't done something to make home healthier,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to go right back to that dysfunctional dance that got them here in the first place.
Mm.
So last year, I think in addition to taking care of the children who live at Eagle Ranch, we did family counseling with, I think, close to 300 parents and siblings of our children.
Last year.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Last year
That's a
alone.
lot.
So yeah,
Hmm.
we really invest in the family because we feel that's the best determinant of long-term success for our kids. If we can get that family recalibrated, that and they learn a healthy dance, if that a healthy familial dance,
Sure.
that's the best indicator of them doing well down the
A
road.
95% success rate on reunification with the family sounds amazing. I mean, really, that sounds incredible.
Well, it's I probably misspoke there. 95% are going to go home. Not all those homegoings are successful
I see.
in our mind. Yes,
Right. Right.
I would say it's in the probably the 50 to 60%.
Yeah.
But I can honestly say the family's better
Mm-hmm.
than when they came. It's just
Yeah.
not where we would want it in
Well, a
an
lot of
ideal
times,
kind of setting.
yeah. I mean, they're coming. I would imagine that a lot of these kids are coming out of tough, multi-generational, systemic challenges, and
Right.
turning that around in a year or two, even a 50 to 60% success rate is an amazing success.
Yeah.
And it sounds like some percentage of them beyond that at least have some chance at it. You know, if you're sending 95% back home, that's great.
You never know, Matt, when those seeds you planted are going to take root.
Mm.
And that's the same thing with us as parents, right? Your listeners, you go, gosh, is little Johnny or little Emily, are they ever going to get it?
Mm-hmm.
But, I think what we're called to do is continue to sow good seeds into our children's lives, into other lives, and you just pray for the harvest.
Mm-hmm.
We recently had he's a young man, he's 25 years old. He lived here from when he was 9 to 11. And I haven't seen him, Matt, since he was 11 years old. And he came here at 25, good looking young man. And he came with his older sister, who's 27. And as they were about to leave, his sister looked at him and said, I'll call him Billy. She goes, Billy, where would we have been if Eagle Ranch had not been there for you?
Mm.
And he looked at his sister and he said, Susie, we don't have to ask that question because Eagle Ranch was there for me. And my life has changed because
awesome.
of it. But there was sort of dead silence for those 14 years. You just didn't hear.
Right.
But those seeds that were sowed took root in this child's life, just like our own children, our grandchildren, or whatever. You just never know when that act of kindness, that act of challenge,
Mm-hmm.
is going to resonate in a child's heart and change the trajectory of their life. So
we don't always know, do we, when we made a difference in the life of another person. But I love that you've been very intentional about it for a long, long time. And I bet there are countless stories like that, whether you know them or not, whether you ever hear about it. I bet there are countless stories like that. So I want to go back to the why, the purpose for just a moment.
Right.
We talked about the fact that Eagle Ranch was founded, 35 years ago, right? Roughly 35 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah.
I came here in 82, and the first child came in April of 85.
Yeah, there you go. So just over 35 years.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's a long, long time for any
Yeah, thank
organization.
you.
Uh,
Thank you.
great success there. Uh, but I am curious. I know when I started my business a little over 25 years ago. And the original why was Matt Hyatt needs a job, right? I'm going to start this business because I need to develop some income. And it wasn't until much later.
I need to put some food on the table.
Right. That's right. That we came up with a rallying cry that other people besides Matt Hyatt could get behind. So I'm just curious, how does that change for you over the last 35 years? Did you go into it with that why?
I did.
Or was it more of a calling?
I went into it, Matt. I'll tell you two quick stories how these two parts of the why sort of came to be. The first one is about that this would be about God and not about me. I met with when I first came here, I didn't know anybody in Georgia, and nobody knew what to do with me. I was asking for money about this dream, right? And people going, "Who is this guy?" They even called. I went to Auburn. They even called the dean of students at Auburn to make sure I went there. They called the athletic department to make sure I played baseball there.
There you go.
So they were just doing all this due diligence that I didn't even know of. I didn't know they were doing it. But finally, one of the guys in our area knew the retiring CFO of Genuine Parts. And he said, "Eddie, I want you to meet with Sonny Ellis, who is retiring." And apparently he was a gatekeeper of a lot of foundation and corporate giving in Atlanta.
Oh.
And so he had dealt with people like me, and they just said, "Eddie, we want you to meet with him." So I talked to Mr. Ellis, got the appointment set up, and he goes, "Eddie, by the way, I want you to bring me your business plan." And I go, "Okay." And I hung up and I thought to myself, "What's a business plan?" I had no idea. And so I said, "I think it has something to do with numbers and, how the thing's going to grow." So I did a business plan on one sheet of paper. And I took it to Atlanta and I met with him. He said, "Did you bring your business plan?" And I had this one piece of paper. Now, this guy's the CFO of a big time company. And I got this one sheet of paper and I said, "Here it is." And he's the quintessential Southern gentleman. So he just didn't laugh in my face. He just picked it up and he just stared at it for 5 minutes, an uncomfortable 5 minutes. And he could have devoured that information in less than a minute. But I know he was trying to figure out how to let me down easily without hurting my feelings, without discouraging me. Finally, he finished. He put down the sheet of paper and he moved it across the desk. And he said, "Eddie," he said, "first of all, thank you for this." And he said, "I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I'm going to tell you something. What you want to do is impossible.
Oh, wow.
But I'm not taking into account what God can do through you." And without a doubt, Matt, that's the most encouraging statement anybody has mentioned to me in my 35 years of being here.
Wow.
Because my heart's desire was for that. That without God, it was impossible. So that was the first part of my why. The second part, to be the hands and feet of Jesus, is I grew up in an idyllic family. Mom and dad who were committed to me, roof over our head, food. You never had to worry about any of that. And when I went to Auburn, I got involved in the Big Brother program. And I did some inner city work. I did some stuff with really poor people in the rural areas. And I just sort of had this epiphany, because growing up in Mountain Brook, Alabama, you think everybody lives like this. And then I was exposed to people who were struggling in life, and I'm going, oh my, not only is my life, is it not the rule, but it's the exception. And the only reason I have what I have is because of the grace of God. That's it. I haven't deserved it. I didn't earn it. It was just given to me out of the grace of God. And it was out of gratitude for what God did for me that I wanted to help children that didn't have those opportunities, that I wanted to be the hands and feet of Jesus to those who struggle. And so both of those happened very early on at the onset, and those things sort of came together for me, and it sort of became my fire. The fire of why I exist on this earth, my why. So that's how that
I
came
love
to
it.
be.
I love
Yeah.
it. You mentioned you grew up in Alabama. How'd you end up in Georgia?
Well, I didn't want to come to Georgia. I don't want the Chamber of Commerce really to hear that comment, but I'm from out in Birmingham, and when I felt this call, I was working for a guy who was All-American for Bear Bryant. I was working at another children's home, and I was a second string catcher at Auburn on a good day. So I was just going to work with him, help him be successful. I'm just an average guy. But after about 8 months, I knew I needed to leave and start my own deal. But I didn't want to, but I knew I was supposed to. And I went down to Mobile, up to Huntsville, trying to find where Eagle Ranch needed to be. And there wasn't a need there. And somehow I found out there wasn't anything for hurting children northeast of Atlanta. And so I believe that need drives vision. And that's where the need was. And that's where my vision was going to encamp. So July 9th of 1982, I packed up my car and came to Georgia.
Wow.
So that's how it started. Yeah.
So you packed up your car. You had a suitcase with $1 million in it to get started. Now, that's not what happened at all, right? You came here with not a lot. How in the world did you come here and get started? I mean, that's tough for anybody. And I'm thinking a lot of our listeners are folks that are in business, or we probably have some folks that are in nonprofit organizations, and trying to launch a vision. I've experienced it. Trying to launch a business, an organization from nothing is tough. Can you kind of walk us through arriving here in Georgia to having a place to call the ranch?
There's so many different facets to that. I remember when I came here, I was able to stay at a place called Ignatius House. It's a retreat in North Atlanta. And the people that ran that knew my father. And I didn't have anywhere to go. And someone said, well, you could stay at Ignatius House. They know you're dead. They knew you're dead. And so I stayed there for 2 months. And then I didn't have anywhere to go. And I ran into the only person I knew in Atlanta off Sandy Springs. And he goes, Eddie, what are you doing here? This guy was a friend of mine, worked at Chick-fil-A. I said, well, I'm trying to start a children's home. He goes, well, where are you staying? And I said, well, I know where I'm staying for 2 more nights, and I don't know. And he goes, there's a guy at Chick-fil-A who needs somebody to house sit in his home in Powder Springs for 6 months.
Wow.
Now, this is the only person I knew in Atlanta of city of that time, 4 million people or whatever. And so I lived in 7 different places. 3 of those times I didn't know where I was going to spend the night. And there's a verse in Isaiah. It says, you took me by my hand as if I were blind and led me along unfamiliar paths and ways I did not know. And I feel like that is sort of my story. Is I just wanted to be about God's business. And there was no plan B. It was just, here I am. And I, Matt, I didn't, at some level, I didn't want to be 80 years old and look back on my life and said, I just didn't have the faith to go after God's best for me. And if I failed, I failed. But I didn't want it to be a lack of faith. And so I just said, God, here I am. I'm going to work as hard as I can. But at the end of the day, if you're not in this, it's not going to work. And there's part of me that really wanted to say, if you are who you say you are, I want you to prove yourself strong in my life. And he did. And it's just like one thing after another. When I was about to just give up, I remember, I know I'm telling you a lot of stories here, but that's
I love
the
it.
way I talk. I remember I was sitting in Powder Springs at this home, and I'd gone up and met with a pastor of a church up in Cartersville. And I was telling him what I wanted to do, and I was about to leave. And he goes, so Eddie, are you asking me for my advice on how you should proceed? And I said, yeah, in a way, I guess I am. And he goes, how much money do you have left? And I go, about $25.
Wow.
And he said, you have $25, and how much longer are you going to be able to stay at this Powder Springs home? I said, I think about another week. And then I don't know where I'm going to go. And he goes, he said, I'm just going to be honest with you. It's clear to me that it doesn't seem like God's in this. He said, Eddie, dreamers like you walk into my office every week. And my advice to is just to go back home. Just go back to Alabama. You gave it a good try, but it's obvious that God doesn't seem to be in this. So got in my car, backed into the telephone pole, and caved in my entire back car.
Oh, no.
And I'm driving down to Powder Springs, and I walked in the home, and I sat down. I said, God, you made a fool out of me. I left everything for you. And people are laughing at me here. They're laughing at me in Alabama. And I said, I've got 1 week, and I quit. I'm done. I can't go on anymore. And I said, if you want me to stay here, you've got to show me something. And I said, I got 1 week. The next morning, it was 8 o'clock, and I was praying, and the phone rang. Don't even know how this guy got my number. And he said, are you Eddie Staub? And I said, yeah. He goes, what are you doing, son? I said, well, I'm praying. And he goes, well, get off your knees. I've got some money for you and some other people do, and you need to get started.
Wow.
And that's the way God has been part of this. So I can't separate my activity from his activity. It was just hand in glove. We've got a job to do for hurting children. So
I love it. I love the way that I love the way you told that story, and I love the way that it has come together. Pretty great.
Thank you.
I mentioned when we got started, this is our 17th installment of the Rocket IT podcast. Do you know that our first was one of your team members, Kelly Brewer?
Oh, yes.
So that was a
wonderful.
Pretty great start. She's an awesome person. I loved interviewing with her, and it was pretty great that she was willing to sort of be the guinea pig on our first episode. So we got to hear a little bit about Eagle Ranch way back then on that first podcast. One of the things that sort of struck me about her story was how she ended up at Eagle Ranch. And it was an invitation from you to consider what for Kelly at the time, I think was a pretty big change in her life, right? To leave what she was doing and to join you at Eagle Ranch. I just wonder, it sort of seems to me like that's probably a common theme, that many times you have extended invitations for folks on a very personal level that have turned out to be not only great for Eagle Ranch, but also really great for the individuals that have been invited. And I
For
wonder
their
if
own
you can,
personal journey. Yeah.
yeah. And so I just wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that, because I think many of us, and I would certainly include myself in this category, might have a little bit of fear about inviting someone into what we consider something very big. Maybe the other person doesn't feel that way. And I just wonder if you could kind of walk us through that a little bit. How do we go about finding those individuals that could potentially be life changers for our organizations, but also potentially be a great opportunity for them? How do you find those people, and how do you make that ask?
Wow. Because that is so important, especially when you live and work in community,
Mm-hmm.
that you have to have people that are a fit with your mission, your values, that the why resonates with them, that the fire of the why resonates with them. I personally, I've just never been shy about approaching anybody about this, because I believe in why we exist. And we just interviewed some folks the other day, and I started my interview process with, I just want you to know, I don't really call this an interview. I call it discernment, both for you and for us. If this is not where you're supposed to be, if this is not part of your personal journey, then I don't care how competent you are in this field, it's just not going to work for you, and it's not going to work for us. So we really are very, very thorough in our whole process, and it's as much for them as for us. And this couple that I was interviewing, they go, "We've never been through anything like this." And they go, "We appreciate so much your due diligence."
This is a
Not
couple
just
to
for
be
you.
house parents.
Yes,
Yeah.
not just for Eagle Ranch's purpose, but you're trying to look out for us too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think at the end of the day, we look for people. We do weighted criteria and all that stuff, all the buzzwords in our world, in the business world. But we just look for people that resonate with why we exist, and resonate with our core values.
I do think that's
And
important.
yeah, because there are people that are, like I said, competent and they check all the boxes, Matt, but there's a miss
Mm-hmm.
with our why, with our core values, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Just not going to work here.
Right.
But there are a lot of places that it would be great, because
Mm-hmm.
you probably align more with their why. So, but that why is so key, and I think a lot of organizations don't spend a lot of time on that. They go right to core values and some of these other things, but they forget why they even exist on this earth. So that it's interesting. A guy named Dallas Willard. People would call him America's C.S. Lewis, and he did an article. It's called "Living the Vision of God," and it was about succession. And it talks about, this is what happens. The founder loves the fire. The founder loves the why. And subsequent generations of leadership increasingly love the effects of the fire. They love the financial benefits. They love the reputation. They love da, 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 da. But the fire becomes a distant memory. And what's important to us as leaders is to keep our folks close to the fire. I'm moving out of my role as executive director, in the near term, and I'm going to move to a different role at Eagle Ranch. But I was talking to our board. I said, sometimes people go, "What's Eagle Ranch going to look like in 50 years?" And my response is, that's not my responsibility. My responsibility and your responsibility, Matt, as a founder, is we just need to get this next generation right, this next generation of leadership right. And if we get that right, then hopefully they'll get the next generation of leadership right.
Right.
Because we can't control beyond the next deal. So, and what I was talking to a guy, CEO of a company you would know, very strong culture, very strong ethos, and I said, what are you going to do to keep this next generation close to the fire of your why? And he said something. He said, every year I meet with every new employee and we go over our why and our vision and values. We go through our history. We go back to where we started physically, our first shop. And then, so everybody has this, and then we celebrate our core values in real time.
Mm.
Like one of our core values is commitment to innovation. When we do innovative things, even in the midst of a COVID environment, we celebrate that in real time. Otherwise, it just becomes words on a page, right? If we say that we are good stewards of all things that entrust us, when that happens in real time, we celebrate that, so that it becomes part of, embedded in our ethos, if that makes sense. So, anyway.
I love it. We, I think, have some things in common in that area. Years ago, I was thinking about the future of Rocket IT and had this idea of developing, you talked about the business plan, developing what I called a 100-year plan. If I sat down today and thought about what I wanted to happen for Rocket IT over 100 years, and there's not very many businesses that last that long. So this is very, some might call it pie in the sky, dreamy vision kind of thing. But just thinking about it, just going through the exercise of thinking, what if you were going to build a business that had the potential to see its 100th anniversary, what is the foundation that needs to be built today?
Right.
And a big part of that was thinking about our purpose, our why, our values, and that solid foundation that would be necessary in order to have that even be a possibility. But you don't get very far into that exercise when you realize that, I started my business at 25 years old. I think sounds like when you started Eagle Ranch, similar in age, we realized pretty quickly that I'm probably not going to be here to see that anniversary. And therefore, it is necessary at some point for there to be a transition from me being the CEO to someone else being the CEO. And at some point from me being involved in the day-to-day organization to not being involved at all, because I'm literally not alive, right? So I love that thought exercise around succession and the transition, and how do you make sure that the things that help the company start and the vision for the organization survive through that transition. I love that you're thinking about that and living it out.
And so few nonprofits or for-profits do it well. There's a book called Built to Last by Jim Collins. I like it better than Good to Great.
Really?
It's sort of my favorite business book. And it talks about succession issues, and it's really quite sobering to think how these great companies just had missteps in succession, and their thinking was off, and with regard to who they brought in, and I look at this work that I'm doing now, and my board is doing now, is very holy work. That this is some of our most important work in the history of Eagle Ranch. And we started it 5 years ago, Matt. We started thinking about succession 5 years ago and started putting things in place so that when this thing happens, it's going to be as smooth as possible and as little drama as possible. But it's really something that I think, to your point, needs to be given real serious thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, my experience has been that just preparing for that eventual transition has helped enormously in making the organization more efficient and resilient. If in a lot of organizations, especially smaller organizations, if something happens to the founder, because we never know day to day how things are going to go, that's a real risk to the organization. And so the practice of preparing for succession actually prepares the organization for the unknowns that inevitably come up in our lives. So really important stuff.
It's interesting. There's two organizations I mentor. They were founder-led. And I start off my talk with them when we meet at Eagle Ranch. I said, first of all, not every organization is meant to outlive its founder. So let's start there. Should this organization continue to exist past you? And you would thought I would have laid a bomb in that. It's almost surely this thing's going to keep, but that may not be part of the thing. It may have had its season with this founder, and it's time for it to go away. But once you say that, and they go, okay, of course we want to keep, okay, now we've got to look at succession. And you can start to work backwards, sort of what you're saying. You got to get, what is this basic time? And let's start working backward. What needs to be in place organizationally, financially, for this transition to happen successfully?
I love
exactly what you're saying.
Well, you mentioned Jim Collins and his book. I've been reading a good book that I want to share with you. You recognize that book? So On Eagle's Wings, kind of the story of how Eagle Ranch got started, and there's a lot of great stories in here about you and about the ranch. But the thing about this book is very hard to find. You got to know somebody to find this book, just about. But it's published in 1995. I know that's 25 years ago because that's when I started my business. I bet there's another. Is there another book? Is there a sequel? Let us know what happens next.
Well, we are looking at that. We had a book that was more just stories of different kids who've grown up here. It's called Seasons. But I think that's something that we're going to be looking at as I sort of transition to another role. Will I have some bandwidth to look at that and sort of do a sequel kind of?
Well, this one's a great read.
Thank you.
Good book. Nice job.
Yeah, you can get those from the ranch. So
there you go.
Your listeners would like a copy. We have plenty at the ranch. So.
Great. So let's change gears just a little bit. I'd like to talk about a little bit about just kids. You've got a lot of experience in this area. My kids, we joke at home. My wife and I are newly empty nesters. So our kids have been launched out into the world, and Maureen and I are at home. But I certainly remember, this has not been very long since this has happened, and I certainly remember when my kids were at home and all the fun and all the challenges that go along with that. One thing that I thought was a big influence in our home, remember, CEO of a IT services company, is just technology.
Right.
And I'd love to hear when kids come to the ranch, most kids I know are already carrying some sort of technology on their person at all times. How do you deal with technology and kids at home at the ranch?
Okay. Great question. Well, when a child comes here, they can't have their cell phone.
Oh, really? Okay.
And yes, and that is end of discussion.
Wow.
And we had a young girl that came here, very, very attractive. And so she was getting all kinds of boy attention. She went to school in Gwinnett, all kinds of boy attention. And so she comes here and says, part of the deal is you can't have your phone here and you need to work on you. You don't need to be working on you in the context of what everybody feels about you on social media. It just confuses, and you need this time for you. So she had a little bit of a hissy fit, and but when she graduated, in her graduation speech, she goes, "I just remember when I came to the ranch, y'all said I couldn't have my phone, and how mad that made me." And she goes, "But looking back," she said, "I never realized how I was," and I think she used this word, "vicariously living through my life through what other people thought," and how much that framed my view of myself. And she said, "It took being at Eagle Ranch to find out who I was apart from that." Interestingly, she's in college now, and I was eating up at I was eating at a restaurant in Gainesville, and she came up to me and she goes, "Mr. Eddie." And I said, "Hey, honey," I said, "How are you doing?" She goes, "I'm doing great. Helping to run deal for the owner, and I'm still going to school." And she goes, "I still don't use my iPhone like I used to."
That's great.
And that time ranch really helped me put that in, prioritize that. And so I think what we try to do, Matt, is to slow life down for kids here and to teach them how to work and teach them how to play. Because that's something you and I grew up with.
Right.
That is sort of part of growing up in our generation. And this generation, there's so many wonderful things about technology, just wonderful. But there's a shadow side to it, right? There's a side that is harmful, that takes kids to an easier place. It's easier to do that than do the work of self, introspection, or to be outdoors in nature, explore. We have 315 acres, as you mentioned. Exploring in the woods, playing basketball, riding a bike, and then learning how to work. And feeling good about a job well done. And so, I sort of, in a way, as the leader here, I sort of want to take this ranch and take it back in time, in a way, in a healthy way. 20 or 30 years where life was a little simpler, a little slower, and still you leverage that technology because that's the world we live in, but to have it as a proper balance.
Right.
So
I got to think it certainly was for us. It's tough for parents to find that proper balance.
mm-hmm.
The kids are going to gravitate 100%. And, I remember learning that one of my kids, and I won't out them, but one of my kids, learned was, sneaking a phone into the bedroom at night. And so,
mm-hmm.
You think, okay, we've got an hour of screen time or whatever as our budget. Well, then come to find out maybe there's more hours happening
Mm-hmm.
After everybody's gone to bed. It's tough to manage that at home. I think probably any parents that are listening to this, especially the kids that are older than probably 8 or 10, would probably be hard pressed to say, okay, we're going to go a year, 2 years
Yeah.
without technology.
Yeah. sometimes it's those baby steps,
Right.
And you remember when you and I were growing up, there are certain people my parents didn't want me hanging around with.
Right.
They say, you're not going to go over to that guy's house.
Mm-hmm.
And the danger becomes when kids have 24-hour access, they're hanging around with people, different format, but they're still hanging around people that are having an unduly influence on your kids that's not good. And so you just got to figure out strategies to mitigate that, because you wouldn't let little Billy in your home and yet little Billy's coming into your home via technology in a
Right.
way that you just go, and it's infecting your child. So it's tough, and you can't go to the extremes. I mean, that's one thing you've got to be careful. We can do that here because we're sort of we got to do it here.
Right.
I mean, we're a little further down the road with children but technology has really exacerbated emotional issues with the kids we see come to us now.
Mm-hmm.
It really has. So
I think that a lot of kids that are visiting the ranch or literally moving to the ranch, they probably are, for lack of a better word, very suspicious coming in. I would imagine they've got their guard up, a lot of them, maybe most of them, when they come in. How do you try to establish a connection and trust with kids that probably, especially reading this book, and there are, not to give anything away of the book, but there are stories in here about kids that maybe come up from that much more challenging place. How do you reach them? Easy question, right?
Well, yeah.
You've got 3 minutes.
It's about building trust, and because I don't really blame them for not trusting us. They don't know us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a process that you've got to sort of earn your trust. You just can't talk the talk. You've got to walk the talk. And it's cliche-ish, but it's really true. They just say, are you real? Are you going to be there for me? Are you going to be consistent? Are you going to be fair? And over time, they see we are, and that starts to open up these opportunities for them to let down their guard.
You mentioned earlier, and I'm probably going to misquote you here, but I think you said something about bringing challenge. And I know you well enough, and I know Eagle Ranch well enough that there's a big balance there between challenge and support. A lot of these kids, I'm guessing, coming in have already experienced a tremendous amount of challenge in their life, and what they really need is support. And I know that you calibrate that very well. Can you kind of unpack that a little bit, and how you decide when, if somebody makes a mistake or they do something that they shouldn't do, how do you know when this kid needs more support or when this kid needs challenge?
Well, we run the ranch off what we call choice consequence.
Oh.
You make a bad choice, they're bad consequences. You make a good choice, they're good consequences. And that is life. Mm-hmm. And that's one reason we do that here. And it says, because we're training you for life, that if you make good decisions, good things happen to you. If you make bad decisions, bad things. And we want to bring that consistency in your life, that reality into your life, because that's going to be a true framework of the way the world works. And I think our challenge is, little boy, little girl, you have an issue with authority, you have a family, you keep this kind of attitude going with authority, you're going to get fired. You're not going to be able to take care of your family. So it's like sort of having them think along with you instead of just throwing these dogmas down at them. Just say, okay, let's talk about what your life's going to look like if you continue to have problems with authority. Let's talk about what your life's going to look like when you keep doing jobs with excellence like you're doing. You're going to have a great job. You're going to be able to provide for your family. I just can't wait to see what your future looks like. So it's like a balance. And but if you start throwing stuff from the ivory tower, they're just going to shut you down,
Right.
because it's not connected to their reality. But you try to take their current reality and sort of extrapolate it
Mm-hmm.
and just say, okay, this is where this is headed. And sometimes they start to think along and go, gosh, I can't live like that. That's the way it was at home. And I don't want that for my family, maybe. Or the family sees it and the family just goes, we want a healthy family. We want to recapture our family. We've got to change our family dance. Or if we don't, and our challenge is, if you don't, this is the way this is going to play out for you. So a lot of people embrace that, Matt, and get moving in that direction. So,
Got it. Can you talk to us a little bit about how education works? I got thinking, if a kid's coming to Eagle Ranch for a year or two, I'm guessing not all of them are close enough to continue to attend their regular school. How does that all work?
that's a great question. I made a decision early on, and this goes to one of our core values about stewardship. We don't have to do all the things we do for these kids here. We just don't. We don't have to have the number of counselors. We don't have to have equine therapy. We don't have to have an on-campus school. We don't have to do play therapy. We don't have to do any of that stuff. And we can just have these kids here and basically just babysit them. Get out a pretty newsletter. Everybody goes, oh, look at these cute little kids. But I would know that we weren't good stewards of our lives, of their lives. And so I look at a child's life, it's like this, from my finger to here, and that we get them for 2 years of their life, of their precious life. We get them for 2 years, and that is a sacred trust. And we go, how can we pour into those children's lives during their time with us where it's going to build resilience and substance in their life? And to your point, one of those is education. Great predictor of future performance and outcomes. And we have a great relationship with the public schools, but they just could not remediate our children. At-risk kids tend to be 2 to 3 grade levels behind.
Really?
We're probably,
Wow.
yeah. And great public schools in our area, but they just couldn't get our kids. And so we did a beta test. I took 4 of my kids who were struggling the hardest, brought them here. We did a homeschool curriculum, caught them up 2 grade levels in 6 months.
Wow.
And I said, if we're going to be good stewards, we've got to do school here.
Yeah.
And with a lower, and so we started a SACS accredited school for grades 6 through 9, which is our wheelhouse, middle school plus 9th grade. And we've been able to catch those kids up. We have one teacher per 10 kids plus a parapro, so 1 to 5.
Wow.
And so we're individually meeting these kids where they are academically and getting them. So hopefully when they go to public high school, either here or back home, that they'll be at or above grade level when they leave us.
That's amazing.
And so, yeah, so that's what we do. But it all goes back to that. It's an integrity issue for all of us in business.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to steward this business in a ways that would be pleasing to God? Or are we going to be sort of like a paper tiger, that it looks good on the outside,
Right.
but inside we just are cutting corners and we're not all we could be for our clients or for our employees?
Mm-hmm.
So we try to be real sensitive to those kind of issues, particularly with our kids. So
I love the importance and the placed on the value of stewardship. That's actually one of Rocket IT's core values, to be passionate stewards. And it's really interesting when you're working through a challenge, just a day-to-day challenge, thinking through stewardship as being one of the core principles in which you make decisions. I've been entrusted with this, in our case, physical device. I've got somebody's laptop that I'm working on, or someone's data for their organization, or something that's on their computer. And I've been entrusted with this device or software or data, and how am I going to behave with it? Or even just in the context of our day-to-day, just being a steward in the office. Makes a huge difference when you think of it with that filter. And I love that that's core in your principles as well. Tell us about what's next. You're making a transition, so you've got a succession plan in place, and that's underway. What's next for Eagle Ranch?
Well, we are under construction right now with our Wing Center. Wing Center, and it is going to house outpatient counseling.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll help children and families so they won't need an Eagle Ranch. Or when they leave Eagle Ranch, when a child leaves Eagle Ranch and the family, they can sort of segue back home using our outpatient counseling.
Wow.
Because those folks are going to know our family systems model. So it's going to be a screen in and a segue out. So it'll identify some families that need Eagle Ranch, and hopefully it'll create a family situation where they don't need Eagle Ranch. So it'll be outpatient counseling. It'll also be an area for marriage retreats.
Oh, wow.
Parenting retreats. And we're also going to do soul care for pastors, ministry leaders. There's a book from John Ortberg did. He sort of took off Dallas Willard's whole thing about soul care that we don't. I had a young man I mentor, and he goes, when you look back, what do you wish you had done? What was your mistake? And I said, I wish I would have attended to my soul more in these 35 years, and not just run pillar to post. And I think he'll learn from that, because
right.
I wish I had attended that. But anyway, so soul care, we're looking at an initiative there. And then finally, there's a thing called the Wings Initiative, where I help other people start or retool children's programs across the country.
Oh,
and
wow.
some
Great.
Internationally. So that's my heart. That's sort of where I'm going to be moving to. So that's what that's going to house. It's about a 10,000 square foot building. Should be through in April, and we'll hopefully have it open this summer.
Wonderful.
That's next on the horizon. Yeah. So.
And you said you were transitioning to a new role, but I don't think you told us what that looked like.
Well, it'll be. I won't be the executive director anymore, but I'll be. I guess
to be fishing in the pond, riding the horses.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this work, Matt. I just love it. I see that we're sending messages to a time that we'll never see. And it just resonates so deeply in my heart that I want to stay connected, but there's a new season for a new guy, new ideas for Eagle Ranch proper. But I think my time is to be putting a footprint, my fingerprints on this Wing Center, and get it up and going, sustainable, programmatically, financially. So that's where I'm headed.
I love that. You mentioned financially, and I would like to touch on that for just a moment. My understanding is that Eagle Ranch has managed to do all of this, and this is a huge undertaking, but to do all of the things that you've built, the land acquisition, and now this new Wing Center, without leveraging debt. Do I understand that correctly?
That's right.
That's amazing.
Yeah, well, that's been our it's not a core value, because core values are independent of the environment, right? And if things got crazy financially, we would go into debt to survive. So that's real important. People think being debt-free is a core value. It's not, because it's not independent of the environment. But the reason, our thought behind debt free is when people give to us, we're completely privately funded. When people give to us, they do not give to us to service a debt.
Mm.
Now, let's say we went into debt and we had to service debt. People gave us $100. We would never tell them it's going to service debt, but it would be going to, right?
Sure.
So we believe stewardship wise that gifts to Eagle Ranch should never go to service a debt. Secondly, people borrow for capital expenditures. That's usually when they borrow. And what's ironic about that is raising capital funds are the easiest thing to do. And you're borrowing to do it, and you're having to pay back with the hardest money that's to get, and that's the day-to-day money.
Right.
So it makes no sense. So people
Isn't that interesting?
I know. I'm going to borrow money to build a $2 million building, and I'm going to service the debt with operational money, which is my hardest to come, So that's the second reason we don't do it, is it makes no sense. And the third thing, if you can't raise money for a capital expenditure, you've either got a vision problem or you got a need issue. Because people will give to need and vision. If you have a need and you have a vision that people can get their arms around, they will give to it. And if you can't raise the money for a capital expansion, you either got a vision problem or you got a need problem. So that's the reason we don't. We've been debt free our entire existence.
That's amazing. That's a huge accomplishment too. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I would love to. It's funny. I want to tap into this, and we're going to wrap up here pretty soon. But I do want to tap into this idea for just a moment that you brought up, that it's easier to raise money for capital expenditures. So that's usually I'm building something, or I'm buying something, or I'm starting a new something, versus operational expenditures, and that is I'm maintaining what we already have. I'm running the day-to-day. Why do you suppose that is? Why is it? Because I think I'd probably fall in that category too. To me, for some reason, it seems more exciting to give to start something new than it is to give to keep something running that's been around for a long time. So I guess there's two questions there. One question is, why do you think that is, that people generally they're more interested in funding capital projects? And then secondly, if you don't mind sharing with us, how in the world do you pay for the day-to-day operations if the only thing that people want to give to is new stuff?
Yeah, I think the reason people gravitate toward capital, and it's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And this other stuff is just dutiful. It's just a grind is a little melodramatic, but it's just daily. And so there's this. My wife told me, I love when bulldozers are turning dirt. I just love the smell of it. I was telling somebody this morning, my wife said, I'm just going to give you a jar of freshly turned dirt for your birthday so I can just smell it.
Right.
But I like this wing center. I just love it. I'm sort of a developer at heart, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I just love that. But it's a discipline that there needs to be. There's a timing issue of, is your program ready? Is your business ready to absorb this new capitalization? Is your ongoing operational support positioned to be able to support that? So I had a dear friend of mine who started something similar to us, and part of my encouragement to folks is it takes 2 to 3 years to be ready to start something. Like you got to do a lot of policy manuals. You got to figure out your program. You got to figure out your operational stream. You got to figure out your referral streams. All this stuff has to be done. And this guy was given $1 million to build 2 homes, $500,000 each. And the people that gave the money wanted him to build them right away. He called me and said, Eddie, these people want to give me $1 million, 2 different people, and they said, I've got to spend it now. And he said, I remember you saying that about this foundation you need to lay before we do that. And I said, I don't have that yet. But if I don't build, I'm going to lose $1 million. And I said, well, my recommendation is you go back to them and explain to them why the timing is not propitious. I mean, it's just not, the timing is not there. You can't do it. And he goes, what if they say then the money's gone? I said, I would let the money be gone. And he
This
did.
from the guy that wrote the one-page business plan.
Yeah. And so if I was his, I mean, if I was where he was, I don't know what I would have done. I hope I wouldn't have done it, but he did it, and it just about destroyed his ministry.
Really?
Because he was trying to he capitalized, but at that same time he was trying to develop program, trying to develop operational stream, trying to policy and all that stuff. So and plus in the context of having at-risk kids. So all this stuff in one thing, and it took him 5 years to come out of that to stabilize.
Wow.
And I met with him halfway through this mess, and he just fell in my arms, just crying. He said, I just didn't think it would be like this. But he said, and he mentors people now too, and he says, you've got to have a firm foundation before you grow things. But that firm foundation is hard work. And those buildings it was sexy, right? Man, look at the house, look at the wings, but you've got to do this groundwork, and it's just hard, it's difficult. So that, I think that's the reason people tend to gravitate, all of us gravitate toward the new, but it's a discipline to say you got to have your program. You got to have all these things lined up before you move there, or you're not going to be able to support it, and either programmatically or financially. So our operational funding, every bit of it's private, $4.6 million a year.
Wow, that's a good sized budget, but you've got a lot to manage, especially with all the different programs you have in place.
Yeah.
So that all is private donations, or are there? I've got to guess that a lot of your residents would have a tough time paying. So is there some sort of tuition?
No. The average payment of a child coming here is $275 a month.
Wow.
And I made a decision when I came here, Matt, a child would never, ever not be able to come here because of finance. And so we have some that pay $5 a month. We have some that pay more than $275, but it just is not it's not a determiner whether we take a child or not. It never, ever will be. So we have an endowment fund that throws off some income, but still we have to raise a lot of money every year. And this sounds simplistic, but it's just God's provision. And a lot of times it's like the loaves and the fishes, and you don't know where the money's going to come from, but it just ends up coming. And we've never sent out an appeal letter in 35 years. And I remember we had a board meeting, and we got the money. We get our mail in the morning, and I told my assistant, I said, "Don't open the mail." And I went into the board meeting, and I have incredible board members, as you probably have seen who they are. And there's probably about 8 pieces of mail. And I said, I'm going to open this mail and show you our donations today. I opened the first one, $25. Next one, $100. Next one, $50. And so after it was all over, I think it was $430.
Wow.
And I looked at my board and I said, this is our daily bread. And we're going to thank God for our daily bread. And we don't know how it's going to come. We don't know how it's going to come, only that it will come. and this is what we have today.
Hmm.
And it's enough. It's enough. And so I told Kelly this when she first started working here. This was back in the early days of Eagle Ranch. We usually get, junk mail, and, probably all in all, we probably get 30 pieces of mail. This one time we got two pieces of mail. That's it, two. The first one I opened was a check for $2 from Dorothy M. Smith from Marietta. $2. It was written, I knew she was elderly because it was written in arthritic handwriting. $2. Never had a check that small before. The next thing I opened was a check for $100,000 from someone in Marietta. And it was almost as if back in those very early days, is that God was saying, love the giver and not the gift. I know that elderly lady, she gave all she could. And those people that gave $100,000, that was the largest gift they'd ever given. And it was sacrificial for them. And I told Kelly, I said, when people give, we have a letter that goes out. I said, I want us to write personal letters to those people that get $25 because they never get personal letters. The people that give $10,000, they do. But our part of who we are is that we love the giver and not the gift. And that, the way we do that, and the way we thank people, and the way we sort of cast who we are transparently, we even share kids we've lost here and how painful that is, because that's reality. We're not a panacea. We're not a panacea.
Mm-hmm.
And just that transparency and honesty and thanking people the day we get their gift, it just has created some goodwill. And people feel that they own part of this ranch, and they do. I mean, I feel like I work for our donors. So anyway,
I love it. Yeah, that's great. That's really impressive that you're able to run that kind of budget off of really the goodwill of folks around the community and beyond. That's really great. I want to move on to the lightning round. And I know we have shared in advance what some of those lightning round questions are, but that would be too easy. So I'm going to throw in an extra one that's not on the list.
Oh, gosh.
I would love to hear. I would love to hear how has the ranch surprised you from your original vision 35 years ago when you showed up in Georgia? When you showed up in Georgia, if you had thought about where you would be in 35 years, how are things different than that?
A lot different, because I would have had 40 boys, one counselor. One counselor, none of what we do now.
Wow, really?
Yeah, that's what I had envisioned. No girls. But I tell you what's happened is there's a verse says, plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. How Eagle Ranch has evolved is a direct result of people around me challenging that original vision and me listening to them. And because of those people, we went from boys to boys and girls. Because of those people, we went from boys and girls to working with families. Because of those people, we have equine therapy. Because of those people, we have a school. Because of those people, we have a Wings initiative. And because of that, we have a Wings Center. And it's just listening to people who see life from a different perspective. We're all myopic, right? We all got like those racehorses, they have those blinders, right? They don't know what's going on here or over here, but the richness of the people that have come here has enriched our mission. So
Fantastic. I love it when it works out to be even better than imagined, right?
oh yeah.
That's terrific. Okay, on with the real lightning questions.
Okay.
The ones you studied for
Yeah.
weeks. Tell us about a person that has made a profound impact in your life.
Jim Webb.
Oh,
Jim was a retired. Do you know Jim?
I
Have you
don't.
heard of him?
Mm-mm.
He was a retired Procter and Gamble executive. We're
Okay.
naming the Wings. We're naming the Wings Center after him.
Oh, wow.
But Jim, my father died when I was in college, and so Jim stood in as my best man. He passed away with pancreatic cancer last year.
Oh, that's too bad. I'm sorry.
But he was a man who had a unique gift to challenge and encourage me, almost in the same sentence. But just quite a remarkable individual. Was on my board from the very beginning, never rotated off. He's the only one that I've never rotated off.
Wow.
He had that organizational knowledge that he knew my heartbeat, I knew his. So
How did you meet Jim?
I met him when I first came to town. Just a mutual friend. They said this guy might have an interest in what you're doing.
They were right.
And Jim, you look at these P&G guys; they're very practical, very regimented, and I think the faith dimension of Eagle Ranch, he was enamored by that. I think I didn't have anything, and there was something about me or my vision that I think touched him, and he didn't let go, so
That is
it's
fantastic.
good to have those people that walk with you regardless
Boy, I tell
of
you
how.
what.
There's been
Absolutely.
some tough days. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I bet there have been. All right. Tell us the single most important lesson you've learned in your professional career.
Don't compromise your values for short-term gain. Always have the long view. Saying no is as important as saying yes. And there have been so many things that have come across my path that, from a worldly perspective, people go, "You got to be kidding me. You're not going to do that. You're not going to do that. That's a gray area. You can get away with that." But we've said, no. It's not who we are. Not judging if other people go there, but that's not who we are. That's not our story. And I think that I think that's what I would say.
I love that, because I bet you have experienced, I've certainly experienced times where we wrestle with an opportunity. Should I, shouldn't I? And a lot of times we're wrestling with it because maybe we sense that it isn't compatible with who we are or what our vision is for our future. And then when we ultimately decide not to pursue that opportunity, it's not a sense of disappointment, it's a sense of instant relief. You felt that before, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just in the rear view mirror.
Right. Yeah.
And we can get on to business. Yeah.
Right. I've just had so many of those times in my life when there are things that have come up, and we really, Maureen and I will sit down and we'll talk about it, and we'll pray about it, and we'll sleep on it and wrestle with it. And there's something just not quite right. And ultimately, we decide, you know what, not for us. Then we'll move on. And almost inevitably, there's just this immediate sense of relief. Oh, wow. Okay. I'm glad I don't have to think about that anymore.
Yep.
I love it. Okay. Last one. Any favorite books or podcasts that you're reading right now?
I just love Built to Last.
Yeah.
I tend to read books over and over and over
Do you
again
really?
rather than a lot of books.
Mm-hmm.
I'll drill in with some.
Jim
There's
Collins.
also
Yeah.
Collins, and on the spiritual front, there's a book. It's real small. It's called "Let Go" by Fenelon. Fenelon.
Hmm.
The name of it's "Let Go," and it's pretty significant.
Okay.
So those are the two that that uh, that I'm sort of honing in on right now. As far as a podcast, I like a lot of Tim Keller's stuff.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Tim Keller out of New York City. Um, that's sort of where I land with that.
All right.
So
Great. If people want to reach out to you or learn more about Eagle Ranch, what's the best way to do that?
it would be eStaub, STAUB at eagleranch.org. That's the best way to get me.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And I
Yeah.
assume your website's eagleranch.org. They will
Right,
visit
that's
the
correct.
website.
That's correct. And our new website is launching today.
Hey, fantastic.
Yeah, so we're
right.
really excited about Stephanie and her team have done an incredible job, and we had a good website before now, but it's really navigation friendly and that kind of thing. So we're excited about that.
Hey, fantastic. Well, congratulations. I know that's not an easy feat.
No.
Websites these days can be major projects. So fantastic. Well, Eddie, thank you so much. Appreciate
Thank
your
you,
time
Matt.
today. I believe it's time to wrap things up. Eddie, from myself and our audience, thank you for spending time with us today. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Rocket IT's Business Podcast. Should you have any suggestion on future topics that you'd like to learn more about, email us at podcasts@rocketit.com. Finally, a quick plug for Rocket IT. We work with businesses, nonprofits, and municipalities in the areas of IT support, information security, and strategic planning. To learn more about Rocket IT and its services, visit rocketit.com. Eddie, thank you. Appreciate
Thank you,
so
Matt.
much.
You
Take
too.
care.